Stop me if you've heard this one before, but folks, Paul Skenes has broken a record again.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me right there on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel.com. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com right now. Tell them Locked On sent you, and make sure to take part in all of the promotions that FanDuel has to offer on a daily basis. I have been doing that a ton, so make sure you go do that as well on FanDuel. And folks, I'll tell you what, I still got in at some pretty good money for Paul Skenes to win Rookie of the Year this year because, again, as you heard in the intro, stop me if you heard this one before, but Paul Skenes made history again on Monday night. And it is history that, of course, is limited to the Pirates, but still history as far as this storied franchise is concerned. And you could see him last night during this game just having a blast. It felt like he was just having a phenomenal time with how things have gone this season, how things specifically went last night when he struck out 9 Miami Marlins hitters en route to becoming one of the best rookie Pirates pitchers of all time, breaking the most strikeouts record by a rookie pitcher in Pittsburgh Pirates history last night, passing Cy Blanton. And that final punch out was number 151 on the year for Paul Skenes. 151 strikeouts for Paul Skenes at the big league level so far this year, folks. And it has been just a momentous year for Paul Skenes. And I don't think really anybody saw this coming. I mean, we knew that Paul Skenes was getting the generational tag. We knew that Paul Skenes was going to be a very good pitcher at this league. I myself, and many of you included, I just don't think we thought it was going to be this quick. And when you consider all of the factors that have come into play, like his debut game against the Chicago Cubs and having a no-hit outing against the Chicago Cubs in Wrigley Field, nearly doing it against the Milwaukee Brewers, and then, of course, even against the St. Louis Cardinals, he goes into the 9th inning of that game in a very dominant outing that unfortunately was a loss. But Paul Skenes is must-watch television for everyone. And him in Pittsburgh is only going to make the game of baseball better. Teams like Pittsburgh don't usually get this kind of caliber of pitcher. And you're seeing it happen elsewhere as well. I mean, you look at Detroit having Tarek Skubal, you look at Kansas City having Cole Reagans, but that isn't Paul Skenes. And you look at what he was doing last night, and Derek Shelton, who we've had some choice discussions about over the last week and change, said, I can't think of anybody I've seen that's been that strikeout heavy, especially early in their career. I've watched guys that have done it, that have been elite pitchers throughout their careers, but I don't know that I remember anybody being a rookie that has been like that. And Skenes, also, this is all on MLB.com, said it's a game, and I think the biggest thing is focused on being in the moment and staying present. All that other stuff is cool, but I think that's a product of being in the moment and staying present over the course of the season. Just executing individual pitches, and then that kind of shows up when you start tallying that stuff up. So moving forward, I think it is pretty clear that Paul Skenes is going to kind of spearhead whatever the Pirates are going to be doing over the next few years. He is going to be the catalyst of a lot of these things. Now, obviously, you still have a plentiful amount of offensive questions, but Paul Skenes is going to be that kind of guy that is just, he's going to continue to propel this team forward. And if you heard me and Gary talk yesterday, you probably found out that we both see, even despite the month of August taking them out of this and all of the questions that are going to come with Derek Shelton and the coaching staff, the arrow is still pointing up. A large part of that is because of the efforts of Paul Skenes, but also because of the efforts of the starting pitching staff in general. We've seen Mitch Keller still have a phenomenal year, not an all-star year because he wasn't voted an all-star, but he's still been all-star caliber for a large portion of the season. And then you have Jared Jones, who was the talk of the town before Paul Skenes arrived because he made the team out of camp, something that you hardly ever see here. And he just looked absolutely phenomenal. Also against these Miami Marlins much early in the season. And of course, these Miami Marlins looked a lot different now as they like at this current moment than they did when Jared Jones faced them. So you start to factor all of this together. And you have Bailey Falter, who was having fun with Skenes last night on Sportsnet Pittsburgh, asking him how many strikeouts he had, and they were counting on their finger and all that stuff and just, having fun with it. Then you have guys like Johan Oviedo, who are going to be back next year after missing this year with Tommy John. You still have guys like Mike Burrows in the fold. And of course, you have the big names like Bubba Chandler, Thomas Harrington, Xander Muth, Braxton Ashcraft. These are guys that can realistically make an impact on this team next season. And I've kind of alluded to this all year because there were portions of the season where the starting pitching staff just genuinely looked like one of, if not the best in all of baseball. But if these guys can stay mostly healthy, that being Jones, Keller, and Skenes, those are going to be your three-headed dragon in the rotation. If you could just fill out the other two spots with whoever it may be, it could be Ashcraft, it could be Chandler, it could be Harrington, it could be Solometo, it could be any of those guys, then no doubt in my mind can tell me that this starting pitching staff does not have the potential year in and year out to be a top 10 unit. And on top of that, really shape the future for this team. Because as I alluded to already, they do have a lot of offensive questions. We know that. But at the end of the day, when you have a starting pitching staff that has the ceiling that this starting pitching staff has, where you can make a real argument, folks, that Mitch Keller is your third best pitcher in your pitching staff, then, folks, that's a really, really good spot to be in, especially for a team that's not going to be able to go out and get the Jacob deGroms and the Justin Verlanders and the Tarek Skubals even when he becomes available of the world. Ben Cherington has managed to build a pretty solid and deep pitching staff if, of course, Bubba Chandler and Harrington in that group do pan out, which I think they will. So for all the things that we say about Ben Cherington and what he hasn't been able to do, one of them is that he's been able to evaluate pitching talent. And I know Paul Skenes is pretty much a gimme for a general manager, but remind yourself, this is also the guy that drafted Jared Jones, drafted Bubba Chandler, Thomas Harrington. A lot of this prospect pool of pitchers that you're seeing are Ben Cherington products. He knows how to evaluate pitching. The development of this pitching has been very good as of late. And that will only continue to be a positive for a Pirates team that is looking towards the postseason in 2025 because, again, you don't know how often these guys are all going to be healthy at the same time. You don't know how long they're going to be together at the same time. And when you have them together, you have to win. We already saw Jared Jones get hurt this year. You may sense fatigue from Paul Skenes, but he's not showing it all that much. And Mitch Keller is already stretched out. So that's the important thing to remind yourself down the end of this season is to stretch out Jared Jones and stretch out Paul Skenes so that this isn't a conversation next year. That way you don't have to start Carmen Majinski like they will tonight. That way you don't have to start guys like Domingo Herman and Jake Woodford. You want to be able to solidify your pitching staff, and it starts with that group of three. But that group of three, Skenes, Jones, and Keller, elevate the ceiling of this squad. They just do. And that means a ton moving forward, because if their ceiling continues to rise and the offense gets better, despite anything that goes on, then the Pittsburgh Pirates, year in and year out, with this pitching staff, have a chance to get to the postseason. Now, other factors come into this. Obviously, the bullpen comes into this. The offense comes into this. But if you had to ask me the one place where I'd feel comfortable about this team next year, and the one place that I think matters the most as far as this team's success next year, it's going to be the pitching staff, especially the starters, because they are kind of they're just kind of the NOS that you put in the engine to go faster in your sports car. That's what they are. They're the coal that you put into the train to make it run. That's what this starting pitching staff is. And Paul Skenes, folks, made history. And you got to credit him for that. Folks, when we come back, as you heard yesterday, myself, there we go, and Gary Morgan are going to be in Altoona this Friday, catching an Altoona curve game. And Endy Rodriguez returned to catching action recently in AA. What are the plans for Endy Rodriguez when he returns next season to the Pirates roster? We'll discuss on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. All you have to do, by the way, too, when you go to Game Time with Game Time Picks, is it will curate and make it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And you can get all in pricing. While toggling that feature, it'll show you your total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. And you can get seat views with a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. And Game Time has the lowest price guarantee, or they will credit you 110% of the difference. And your purchase is always covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. That is code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. And download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every day. After listening to this show, make sure you make your second listen Locked On MLB with Paul Francis Sullivan. He's covering everything going on in the world of Major League Baseball as the postseason approaches. And the last time I looked, not that far away. So make sure you go show Sully some love over at Locked On MLB. I've been on his show plenty of times, so make sure you go do that. And as mentioned, I will be in Altoona with Gary Morgan on Friday. Be a fun time. Get to see Termar Johnson among some of the other players that will be there, including Endy Rodriguez. Endy Rodriguez, of course, the switch hitting catcher from the Pittsburgh Pirates, on the 60-day IL, had Tommy John surgery in the offseason on his elbow. Very unfortunate that he had to miss this year, but it is interesting when you consider Endy Rodriguez and where he'll be in 2025, because we've seen him play a little bit of first base at the lower levels of the minors, but now he comes back up to Altoona tonight, and he did play 31 games with Altoona in 2022, hit 356 with a 442 on base percentage and 1,120 OPS. So Endy, very, very good with Altoona. So we'll see what he can do. But the big story here is right now the emergence of Joey Bart has made the Pirates' catching position very interesting. Because obviously a lot of people were kind of hoping Henry Davis was going to elevate himself and take that next step this year. Well, that just never happened. So it is frustrating because you want your former number one overall selection from, also mind you, 2022 or 2021, to start making an impact. And when you have Joey Bart now, who for all intents and purposes is going to be your starting catcher next year, then you start to wonder, where does that put Endy? Because I think Henry Davis is just a catcher. You could obviously move him to first base if you wanted to. They've already tried to move him to the outfield, and we already saw how that went. But at the end of the day, a guy like Endy, he's very versatile. We've seen Endy Rodriguez in his time be a very versatile player in the minor leagues. In his limited time as a major leaguer, he was a catcher. But when you're recovering from Tommy John surgery as a catcher, that makes you wonder, okay, what is your play behind the plate? Like, what are you going to be able to do? Because if you can't throw from behind the plate, then teams are just going to take that to their advantage, i.e. Yasmani Grandal. But in this case, this is an injury-based one. But you look at what Endy has done throughout his minor league career. He's played catcher, first base, second base, left field, center field, right field, and designated hit. So Endy Rodriguez is one of those players that you are really excited about, more so for me, because you guys know I absolutely love switch hitting. Like, if it was up to me, the Pirates would have a lineup of left-handers and switch hitters everywhere. But considering this as well, obviously the most experience he has is as a catcher. Mind you, he's also thrown 2 1/3 innings as a pitcher. Just to throw that in there too. But he's played 321 innings as a first baseman, 147 innings as a second baseman, and 187 innings, around actually 200 innings as an outfielder. So you kind of go into this 2024 offseason heading into 2025, wondering about Endy Rodriguez and saying, okay, well, first base, I think, would be the most ideal option because that's where you really need the most help right now. Albeit, yes, I know you have Rowdy Tellez. But I don't know if Rowdy Tellez, excuse me, and Connor Joe really push that position over the next level. Because albeit Rowdy has ended up hashing out kind of a decent season for himself, it hasn't been what the Pirates wanted or expected. Same thing with Connor Joe. He had a great start to the year, hasn't been that great since. So you start wondering where Endy's going to be. Now he's going to return to game action with Altoona. It appears he's going to catch a little bit, which I think is potentially pretty good and could mean some good things. But at the end of the day as well, you wonder what they do. Like, is he going to be a catcher? And I feel like a lot of it kind of hinges on what Henry Davis becomes. Because Henry Davis, much like Endy Rodriguez, has just not met expectations yet. He has not been a guy that has overwhelmed anybody and shown to be a crazy good talent. He's done it in the minor leagues, but that's been something we've talked about a lot this year too, about these guys that go down to the minors and play really well, but it just doesn't translate to the big league level. Endy hasn't been able to do that yet. Now, obviously, his injury has prevented him from doing that. And Yasmani Grandal would never be on this team if Endy Rodriguez was healthy. But it is an interesting conversation piece, is where do you play him in 2025? Do you stick him behind the plate? Do you put him at first base? Do you maybe flirt with the outfield? And on top of that question, does he even start at the MLB level right away? My guess would be no. I think he'll be in AAA for a good minute before he comes up here just to make sure his bearings are about him. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I do consider Endy Rodriguez a guy that is a part of the future of this team, a guy that is a part of the future of what he can do. We'll just see if he can ever amount to it. I think that's the biggest question right there, is can he amount to what he's done in the minor leagues? And I'll be watching closely what he does with Altoona, because I think it's important to see what he does with Altoona at the end of this season and how his maturation process goes through recovering from the injury and how much of a better player he is when spring comes around in 2025. And I'll tell you right now, I'm excited about it. I really am. I think I'm excited about it. I think Endy can be a guy that can help anywhere. And if he can manage that, folks, then that's a very good thing for this Pirates team. Speaking of this Pirates team, there are still games to be played in 2024. And the Pirates right now are in a series with the Miami Marlins. 6:40 tonight. This podcast will be dropping just before the game. But can the Pirates end the season strong? And what would it mean to end the season strong? We'll discuss on the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. As for tonight's game, the Pirates are favored against the Miami Marlins. And if you think Carmen Mlodzinski and the Pittsburgh Pirates can defeat the Marlins and clinch a series victory, go ahead to FanDuel right now and go win yourself some money. So just visit FanDuel.com right now to download America's #1 sportsbook, an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. All righty, everybody, and welcome back to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates, your favorite Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. If you're on the go for this game against the Miami Marlins tonight, make sure that you, of course, listen on SiriusXM. All you have to do is look up Pirates. You can find it and look for it on the go. Pittsburgh Pirates, 68-76. That means, folks, to have a better record than last year, they'd have to lose 9 games max. 9 games maximum to have a better record than next year. Now, would 77-85 be that much of a jump forward? No. Not based off of the expectations that were said to us when the season began. Pirates have 2 more games against the Marlins, 3 games against Kansas City, so we're up to 5. 4 games against St. Louis, we're up to 9. 3 games against Cincinnati, we're up to 12. 3 games against Milwaukee, we're up to 15. And 3 games against the Yankees. So we have 18 games remaining on the season. The Pirates win tonight. That means that they could have a winning record the rest of the way and still only improve by 1 game. 18 games left. So they went 9-9 in these 18 games, they would finish at 77 and 85. But don't look now. They've won some games. They're on a 2-game winning streak against teams they should be beating in the Washington Nationals and the Miami Marlins. St. Louis is a winnable series. Kansas City, your final weekend series at home of the year. It's a winnable series. Then you look at Cincinnati, a team the Pirates have not lost to in a series yet this year. Milwaukee is Milwaukee. You don't know what you're going to get there. The Yankee series, who knows who plays. But at the end of the day, this is a team that if you can get to 77 wins, as I mentioned earlier, you're not going to be happy about it. But that's 10 out of 18. Let's bump that up to 13 out of 18. What if the Pirates go 13-5 in their last 18 games? Quite possible. They could do it. That would put them at 80 wins. What about 12-6? 79 and 83. A record around that would be an indication that this was a Pirates team that was very competitive all year, which it was. Mind you, it was a very competitive team all season. August was just a dreadful month that started with a 10-game losing streak pretty much, and that took them out of it. And I've said it on this show since that dreaded stretch of games that if you win 5 of those, 5-5, hell, if you win 3 of those, 3 of them out of those 10 games up to this point, the Pirates would be 71-73. 71-73, I think we're feeling a lot better. If you win 3 of them, 5 of them, you're 72-71. It's a crazy feeling, isn't it? Because 72-71 is currently what the St. Louis Cardinals are, and they're 6.5 back of the wild card. It's crazy, isn't it? Just how much that stretch spoke to what was going on. But if the Pirates can end the season strong, much like they did last year, then I think that propels them going into 2025 with a newfound confidence, seeing as a lot of this team is going to be back next year. I've said that plenty of times on this show. A lot of this team is going to be back next season. They're going to remember that month of August. And they would very much remember a strong ending to the season. Really, it comes down to the starting pitching. Can the bullpen just hold on in games? And what can the offense give you on any given night? All 3 facets. But I think they have a very good potential to end this season strong, albeit it's not where we would like them to be. Go into 2025 with some potential. Go into 2025 with some confidence. You never really know what could happen next. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. Follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can find this show on YouTube and all of your audio platforms because it's free and available to you all the time. And your host that you love so much is going to go get some chapstick because his mouth is dry. But until then, folks, after I do that, I'll see you tomorrow to talk about some more Pirates baseball. But until then, see you on the flip side.